Hi, it's Sharon from SharonTheReader.com. I had a very pleasant visitor this morning, and I think in my last podcast I had said I was not a royalist, which is true, I'm not. But I woke up and this really did take me quite by surprise, and I have a lot of notes here. You'll hear the paper rattling, because I don't want to forget any of the stuff that was told to me. So, the lady in question this morning was actually, and I was completely surprised. I would imagine this person would go to someone who did believe in royalty, but it was actually Princess Diana. And she looked one way when I first woke, and then when she was talking, she kind of changed a little bit. So the first look that I got of her was when she was probably about 19 and her hair was the floppy fringe, just like a young girl on the street, just simply walking to work or getting into her car or whatever. And she did look quite lovely. She looked very fresh. Her complexion was amazing, very little makeup. That was the first impression she showed me of herself. So, what she said was, and there'll be a lot of reading going on here, I really don't want to forget any of it. She said, I want to talk about my sons. That was said in the plural. And particularly, I want to talk about Harry at this moment. She said Harry was very intuitive, naturally. And she said that he took that after her. She was also very intuitive. But she was never aware that she actually was until probably she was maybe around about 30. So she said, yes, he has always been like that ever since he was a child. The second thing she said was that he had been running all his life from what had happened actually to her. As far as she was concerned, there was this constant running away from it, not wanting to look at it, engaging in anything, particularly fun, which, funny enough, I had said in the previous podcast. But fun seemed to be the thing that worked for him. Keeping his mind occupied, being physical, that sort of thing. That seemed to keep him driven, if you like. And while being driven, he didn't have to think so much about his mother's death, which it does seem that both Harry and William are very much aware of. Not that she's dead, they're obviously very aware that she's dead, but of the circumstances that surround her death. And that was one thing that Harry was having a lot of problems with. A lot of emotional problems, perhaps even a little bit of a mental problem. And the reason why he had actually shut down, and fun became the thing that he actually was more into than anything else. She also said that all his life, when it came to the girlfriends that he was going out with and the girls he was dating, that she knew herself that he had always been looking for her in every woman that he had gone out with. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but it wasn't meant in a strange way. It was kind of, he wanted that protection that she had given to him when he was a little boy. He wanted that warmth, he wanted that affection, that comfort, that security. That's really what he was looking for. So she wasn't surprised that when Meghan came on the scene, that he could gravitate towards that very easily, and it would work very well for him. Then the third point she made was that he had turned his back on the royal family completely at this moment in time. He completely walked away, has walked away. There may have been moments in this past week or so when there was a little bit of, I'm leaving this behind. But really what he was talking about, or what he was thinking about, was, I'm leaving my friends behind. I'm leaving the army behind. I'm leaving the things that I enjoyed, the things that I felt that I was a part of, that is all being left behind. And I think that there was a little bit of sadness over that. There was absolutely no sadness over walking away from the family. So she was very clear on that one. But then she said, point 4, she said, things are always going to catch up with him. He has addressed a lot of his stuff about his mother, but at the same time, the fact that, he makes decisions very quickly, and his want and his need to get away from anything that was royalty. As far as she was concerned, it was kind of like he was running away from that. The same way as he ran towards fun, he was running away from the royal family to simply live a life as a fairly private person. That being his thoughts. With his family, with his child, with his wife, it seemed that would bring him the happiness that he'd been looking for. He's never been a person who liked the paparazzi. Journalists, not particularly. Doesn't particularly like giving interviews. He likes his privacy. And she says that came from her, from what they had to witness as little boys, both of them. That, no matter where she went, no matter who she was with, when she was with them, there were photographers everywhere, all the time. So that really left a mark in this young man. And also the 5th point she made was that while people think this was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, it was what he needed to do. And to her that was very important. His needs above people's, above the family, above the British public even. It was something that he himself needed to do. And she said a very interesting thing, and it was very telling actually. I find this pretty fascinating. She said that basically it was like her and Charles, but it was in the reverse of her and Charles. She believed that she was very much in love with Charles, and he wasn't in love with her, but she served a purpose as far as Charles was concerned. The heirs to the throne, the type of a wife he should be seen with. So basically she was saying that, it's if you reverse Meghan and Harry, he's in love with Meghan. Meghan, basically, I don't think she believes that she's truly in love with Harry the way she should be. And also that they will grow apart. That was one of the things she was very specific about. But she also said that it would make him a much stronger personality. And personally speaking, coming from my point of view, what I've seen of him on TV, on the news, whatever, he always gave me the impression that he did have a very strong personality. But his mother said no, he didn't. William had a very strong personality, but Harry did not have that. Harry was very sort of like all in with this thing and, not interested in that thing. It was kind of like almost extremes. She seemed to think that when the marriage broke down, and not if the marriage broke down, but when the marriage broke down, that at the end of the day, he would be a much, much, much stronger person, the same way she was. Because as she said, when I was, and she showed me the age where she was roughly 19, she says, I really didn't know what I was taking on. I had no idea what I was walking into. So she actually thought that she was walking into a marriage, a relationship with a man who loved her and who would always love her and who she would love and who would stand beside her and, who she could support in her way. But that definitely wasn't the way it worked out for her. And she did say, if she had been a little bit older and more experienced, things may have been much, much, much different. She wouldn't have had that sparkly-eyed thing. Because, as she said, and it probably is true, although I can't recall it, we spent very little time together. We actually did not spend a lot of time together before we got married. So I don't think she really thought that she was truly in love with him when she's looking back. Okay? She said that when he returns, this was Harry, when he returns to Britain, and he will be welcomed by the British people. So she seemed quite happy with that he would be embraced again by the British people. You know, that the British people were warm people, and even though maybe they felt that he had stepped out of line, that basically they would still embrace him and understand what was going on with him and take him back into their hearts again. The next point she made was, he will walk a long, hard road just as I did. So that kind of gives you a rough idea on, I think that the time limit I give it was 5 years. That gives you a rough idea, the length and the difficulty of the road, if you want. And I said that, personally speaking, I thought the first year would not be a bad year for them. It would be a year of excitement, trying new things and doing what they want to do. You know, and she was not in disagreement with that. She said, yes, that's how she saw it as well. But the difficulty was that whilst not wanting to be royal, it's like he's just lifted himself out of his own country, out of his own culture, and went somewhere else and left everyone behind. And basically, because of the rift between the two brothers, which she does address, he had kind of left his friends behind him. He had left people who understood him behind him, people who he had served with, stuff like that, right? And this was all not going to be, you know, in Canada. There would be none of that. It would all be her friends. It'd be starting with her friends. So she felt he would be kind of lost and a little bit lonely. And she said that she herself personally was completely lost. She said, I was absolutely lost. So, you know, she could relate very strongly to that. And also, she said she was very much alone and lonely. You think, well, Meghan and Harry, they have each other. She didn't have anyone. But she said, no, you can still feel lost and alone even if you're with your partner, when your partner is not meeting your needs, when they're not interested in the things that you're interested in. That was her take on that. And again, she just says the same thing over again. It made me stronger in the end, and I believe it will benefit him in the same way. Then she did kind of address the rift that has been going on between the two young men, her two sons. And she said that as a mother, it vexes me. She made it very plain that it wasn't painful. She could watch this from the other side, but there was no pain attached to watching her two sons, you know, kind of break away from each other. And then these two boys had a very strong bond all of their lives. But she said, no, you don't feel that pain when you're here, but you can be vexed. You may not be totally that happy with it, if that makes sense. But then she said, it makes it so much easier when you can see the big picture. So she was implying that she could see the big picture and how this would actually play out. So, okay, the boys are not getting along at the moment. She said it will come to an end. Their disagreement and their little feud, whatever it is. She didn't go into detail there, but she said it will come to an end. They will come back together again. And they'll come back together again with much more understanding and much more honesty and much more maturity. So it would really be, it wouldn't be Harry as the younger brother, William as the older brother. It would be two equal people, regardless of the fact that William eventually will be king. It was two equal human beings. And that seemed to be the thing that the maturity brought, and that's what Harry seemed to be bringing back with him, was this honesty, this understanding, this maturity, and this knowledge of knowing what had meaning, while not running away from anything. There was no running away involved. There wasn't, I don't want to look at this, I don't want to think about that. It was kind of like, I have addressed it all, and I am stronger for it. So that was her thing about the two boys, her two sons. Both my sons will change the monarchy. And she felt that it was time that it needed to be changed. That's what she said, not William. She said, both my sons will change the monarchy, and it needs to be changed. And it needs to find its place in the modern world. So that was that page and a half. The next thing she said was Harry would remarry, and I said that myself, that he would come back to the UK and that he would remarry, and that he would find the true love and the true happiness which he'd always been looking for. That seemed to, whatever is being spent with him now, the emotions, the highs, the lows, whatever it happens to be, there would come, a nice equilibrium, and that would actually benefit him more than the highs and lows of a marriage, which he's in at the moment. So there was true love in front of him and true happiness, and at the end of the day, she seemed to feel that was really the important thing, and it really was the thing that he was looking for. That was what he set out to try and find for himself. She said, no one ever leaves the royal family unless they leave in the way I was made to. And I thought that was quite telling. She did go into a little bit of detail, and I'm not going to go into that detail here because it was personal, if you want. And I don't mean, it was personal to me and you don't deserve to hear it. That's not what I'm saying. She showed me things, and, let's put it like this. There are people who believe that it was a car accident, and there are people who believe that it was not a car accident. Okay? And basically, I'm going to let you make up your own mind about that one, because you probably already have made up your own mind. She did show me what happened. Okay? It was not a pretty sight. And then she said, about leaving the royal family, you don't get to leave unless you leave the way she left, which basically was through death. She said, look at Sarah and how strongly she's standing by Andrew's side again, and she knows what happened, but people are brought back if they can be trusted to be useful. So the implication there was that Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's wife, who that relationship ended in divorce as well. When you think about it, it is kind of strange, because I know that she never really had much to do with the palace after they broke up. Her children did, but she didn't. And then suddenly, after the Epstein scandal, we had Sarah defending Andrew right, left and centre. And that's exactly what she meant. So obviously the royal family believe that they can trust Sarah now. They're making use of that. So it kind of makes him look like not the husband, but the ex-husband, who's a good man, and the father of his two daughters, and a good father. So that was that. Yeah, this was a little bit interesting. She said, I can't describe what took place within the royal family, but I will say I could never have gone back again. And I don't believe that she was talking about, you wouldn't believe the rifts or you wouldn't believe the arguments. There was something deeper. She didn't actually go into it, but there was something deeper. And also, she said that at one stage, Charles had asked Jimmy Savile to try and help out with their matrimonial problems. And she said that he really gave her the creeps, There was something about that man being near her or touching her arm. She indicated to her arm. She said, and he was just so creepy. And also, she said, what good could a man who had never been married have any understanding of her marriage at all? He had never been a married man. He had never had those problems. So how was he going to advise her? Which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So there was no love when it came to Jimmy Savile. Actually, I think she felt pretty disgusted by him, and disgusted that Charles could be taken in by him. So that didn't go down terribly well with her. She also said something that did surprise me, because as I said, I'm not a royalist, and if you are, maybe you know these things, but I personally didn't. She said that Prince Philip hated her. She didn't say disliked her. She didn't say didn't get on with her. She said Prince Philip hated me. And I was so young, and looking back, it shocks me to see how young I was in that position. In that actual position of marrying, having children, when really at the end of the day, I don't think she'd even come to terms with who she was herself. This fairy tale took over, and it felt good, and she felt wanted. And a large part of that went back to her own parents, where there had been a divorce, and she said that she really felt that there was nowhere for her to be. There was nowhere to run to, She was on her own. She felt that no one had time for her to listen to her, that being her parents, her mum, her dad. Life really wasn't good for her. She did say that she enjoyed sharing the flat with the girls she shared with. That was a happy time for her. That was something she seemed to truthfully enjoy and be very carefree. She seemed very carefree at that point in time. It was her youth actually was surprising her when she was looking back at where she came into the family and what she expected, which was she wanted to be a good wife. She wanted to be the woman who would stand beside her husband. And she also had this feeling that Charles was maybe never allowed to have fun, and she could supply fun, and she could laugh, and she could dance, and she enjoyed music and stuff like that, and she felt that this was something that he had lost out on, and that she could bring in, and that they could both totally enjoy together, which actually wasn't the case, because Charles had developed in his own way, and he had his own interests, and those interests were not interested her in any shape or fashion. It just wasn't who she was. So, like she said, something about Balmoral was for her terribly boring. She was just used to city life, London life. She enjoyed that. So that was that part. And this was actually, I thought, very balanced, exceptionally balanced, the way she was able to look at things and see things. But this was the next part. She said, I was so thankful to Charles for not wakening the boys when he heard of my death. He let them sleep until the morning, and he gently broke it to them when they awoke. She said, there is no need to wake anyone with bad news. It can always wait a few hours, if it is not something that anything can be done to change. So it did strike me as maybe this was the woman she always was, or maybe this is what you feel like on the other side. There was no anger, and I do remember thinking when they broke up, the tabloids were full of it, one seemed to be outdoing the other, if you know what I mean. And it felt like there was an anger. With what she was talking about today, there was no anger. There was a gratefulness to Charles for the way that he took care of the children the way he didn't wake them and give them bad news. Because she kind of showed me, if you wake a child, you wake two children, you tell them their mother has been killed in a car accident, you're waking those children out of their sleep. And what are they going to do? What can anybody do? They can't do anything. Those kids would have been just sitting, just dazed, stunned. And as far as she was concerned, there was enough time for that, to be dazed and stunned. You didn't have to wake them to break that bad news to them. I think really that's all. Before she left, as I say, I saw the very young Diana with the floppy fringe and things like that. Before the end, she had kind of become more, I wouldn't say sporty, but yes, say jeans and a sweater, very tasteful. Her hair was high, if you want higher, like backcombed or whatever, and there was a lot of volume in it, and her makeup was perfect. But she herself personally hadn't really changed from, well, she had matured, I presume, over the years that she was showing me, but she herself hadn't actually changed in any shape or any fashion. I will say one thing, I may not be a royalist, but I have to admit, I was left with the impression that this was a woman who cared very deeply about women, and who cared very deeply about people in the world, people, with AIDS. That was not a fit-on, that was genuine. She was genuine about that. And it was the same with the landmine campaign. She was very genuine about that. She really seemed to have found something that she could offer herself to. And she did love to be around kids. She really loved to be around children. She was a natural with them. She was also a natural with people, and I think she knew that. But it wasn't an act and it wasn't a play. It wasn't kind of like, okay, I'm going to act this way today. This was a very natural part of her personality. So, while not being a royalist, and never will be, I will say one thing. I did have a lot of admiration for her. And as regards Harry, I'd never looked on it the way she actually explained it, because, well, you don't really, do you? Charles and her, Meghan and Harry, that one was in love very much. She was in love with Charles, Harry's in love with Meghan. But the crossover comes when they realise that they want different things than they can give each other. So that took me by surprise. But as she said, it makes him a very strong person in the end. And she did say that she felt that she was very strong in the end. Also, I will just add this little tidbit to you. She said she was not pregnant when she died. There was absolutely no pregnancy. She did say that she was exceptionally fond of Dodie, and he was very fond of her. And in time, maybe, they would have fallen in love. Maybe in time they would have fallen in love, married and had children. But at the point where the death took place, they were not at that point at all. He did buy her a ring that day, and she had chosen the ring, but it was a dress ring. It was like a friendship ring. It was a gift from him to her. It was not an engagement ring. And as she said, who knows? Maybe if things had been different, then they may well have fallen deeply in love and got married. But at that point in time, it was much too soon for them. They hadn't got to that point in their relationship. But she said that his father made her exceptionally welcome, and it wasn't for show, it was genuine, and that Dodie himself actually treated her really in a way that she just loved to be treated, like she was special. She was the woman that he was with. She was the lady on his arm, and that she could look at him and she could look up to him with admiration. And he had the same admiration for her, but it was from a male to a female, and she said she didn't get that with Charles. So that's all I can tell you, and I've taken up a lot of your time. If you like what you're hearing and you want to subscribe, click the bell. If you want to comment, I'd be more than happy to hear your comments. Please post underneath. And also, if you really like it, check out sharonthereader.com. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, take care. God bless. Good night.